Welcome everybody to our webinar called Beyond Paralysis, How to Talk to Your Son or Daughter About Sexuality. Parents' words matter most. I'm Max Barrows. I am the Outreach Coordinator for Green Mountain Self-Advocates.
Hello everyone, my name is Karen Topper and I work as the State Coordinator for Green Mountain Self-Advocates. Max, you want to say a few things about what Green Mountain Self-Advocates is?
Sure. Yes, Green Mountain Self-Advocates, we are a statewide peer-run disability advocacy organization. We have 23 local groups throughout the state of Vermont, all of which have about 600 plus members with intellectual and developmental disabilities involved. And my job as the outreach coordinator, I go around and provide technical assistance to all the groups in terms of like running their own meetings and giving like updates of what's going on in the state, and just mainly just there to support them and just to make sure that they know they're in tune with what issues matter to them, and also to have them encourage them to speak up and also set goals for their group for the future. So when I say technical assistance, I don't mean computers and stuff. I mean just giving them support. So I know the word technical can be pretty loaded. So I just wanted to point that out. So moving to the our goal for today is to become more comfortable and confident communicating about sexuality with our young and grown children. Sexuality is a hard topic to talk about. We all respond differently to this topic. Some are comfortable, some are not comfortable, and some are in between. We hope today you will gain more confidence and overcome the barriers that make it so difficult. So what we're going to do today is we are going to look at what makes it difficult to talk about sexuality. We are going to learn some communication tips. We are going to take time to practice, and we're going to have time for questions and answers.
So Max, let's get us started by having you quickly, can you tell the audience here, our participants, what we mean by self-advocacy?
I can do that. Well, when you hear the term self-advocacy, we define it as encouraging people to speak up for themselves, speak up for yourself and others. It's really important too to get to know yourself, which means knowing your disability and being proud of who you are, which also can be feeling good about yourself. So that is very important in self-advocacy. Self-advocacy also is about learning new things and definitely making your case heard. Also negotiating for what you want and what you need in life to succeed, and definitely making your own decisions and taking responsibility for your actions.
So my next question for you, Max, so thank you, Max, that was right on the money there. So what do we mean by this title of this term, what is sexual self-advocacy?
Well, one thing I can tell you is sexual self-advocacy is harder than self-advocacy. But again, you want to be feeling comfortable meeting people, flirting and asking somebody to dance, being free about your sexuality, like if you are gay, straight, or lesbian, or questionable. You want to be feeling free to speak to your partner and tell them what you want and don't want in a relationship. So really kind of taking the advocacy part of it and really speaking up in a relationship, setting boundaries, and knowing how to deal with some pressuring. pressuring you to do something, someone pressuring you to do something sexually that you don't want to do. Also, it can be telling your parents about your relationship when they do not agree. So again, that's standing up for yourself. Dealing with your partner's parents being a barrier. Dealing with parents when they try to hitch you up with other people. And of course, learning from your mistakes. Definitely, you can't learn if you don't make mistakes.
Thank you, Max. I just wanted to let you know, hey, Max, we've got a question here that someone wrote in for us. And I'm not going to get into a great lengthy answer right now because actually a lot of what we're going to talk about today will cover this question. But someone wrote in and said that their son is an adult with a developmental disability, and the mother, I think it's mother or father, the parent, said she's never really, or he's never spoken to this, I'll just say it's a woman, her son, about sex. And is it appropriate for me to bring up the topic of sex, and how do I start that conversation? He's never brought it up with me. And so we would say, yes, it's really appropriate for you to bring up the topic of sexuality. As you'll hear us comment on throughout the presentation, we think it's very important for parents to talk about their sons and daughters because that's where we get our values about sexuality. And as you hear throughout the presentation, we'll talk about how give you different tips and different ways to kind of get the conversation going. I'm going to hand it back to you, Max.
Well, I actually have a question for you, Topper. Who is considered sexual?
Well, when I think of who is considered sexual, immediately what comes to mind to me is like movie stars or TV celebrities, sometimes politicians, models. I mean, I think the point we want to make here is that our media is so pervasive, and that sometimes we don't take time to kind of process with our families. And we feel at Green Mountain Self-Advocates that it's very important for family members to check in with their loved ones and kind of find out, you know, what are the different things that they're being bombarded with? What are the different images and messages that they're getting from the community, from the media? And, you know, what are things that your son or daughter are believing from the messages they're getting from the media? People with disabilities have historically been considered to be either asexual or at times kind of oversexed or predatory. And of course, we as a disability rights community and as families and allies and people with disabilities, we know better. But there's a problem that when people with disabilities are expressing their sexuality, they often are subject to prejudices in our community. And so therefore, people are kind of underserved and very often ignored when it comes to sexuality information. And what we find is that support staff are widely undertrained when it comes to supporting people around these issues.
Thank you very much for that great answer. So, growing up, we have all heard different messages about sexuality. So my question to you is, what are some messages you got about sexuality growing up? When you are doing this, please consider that these messages could be directed at the gay community, not just people that are straight.
So at this point, if there's people that are listening live, we would suggest that if you wanted to, you could, you know, type in your answers. But thinking as just when you were or just think about the answers when you were growing up. What are the messages that you got from kind of your family about sexuality? So I can kind of share some of the ones that I got. I'm 58 years old and was born in 1955. So the messages that I got in the late 50s and throughout the 60s were that good girls don't do it. You need to wait until you get married. That men should be tough and they should be in charge. That most of my family didn't talk about sex at all. And that somehow I got the message that sometimes it was kind of dirty or kind of shameful. We also have some other comments here. Somebody else said good girls don't have sex until they are married. Thank you for writing that in. Some people said that they would never talk about it. Kissing and hugging was not done in my household. That some messages people got that it was sacred and that it was only during marriage. Another person wrote in that don't have sex with anyone who you don't love. Another message was use caution so you don't get any sexually transmitted diseases. Right, and Max, you had something that you not heard from your family, but a message you heard from the community.
One thing I I know you said your age. I'm 27 years old, but one common thing I have gotten about sexuality, this is really directed at people that are gay and identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, is if you're gay, you could be demonized. Demonizes you. You could go to HE double hockey sticks.
So kind of getting back to the person who asked that question, like that you said that you had not really brought up and had a kind of formal conversation with your son about sexuality. I think the point we want to make here is that our culture, our families, we're sending out messages about sexuality all the time. We had some other folks write in about messages that they received that said, you talk about it only with your parents. Someone else wrote in that they said, you need to be safe. So what we find, Max and I have done workshops about sexuality and people with disabilities all over the country. And I do want to give a little bit of credit to our dear friend, Catherine McLaughlin, who is a sexuality educator from New Hampshire. And she's worked with us for more than 10 years now. And so a lot of the materials we're sharing are things that we have learned from her. But one thing we found in talking to people with disabilities about the messages they've received is that actually a lot of the messages they've received about sexuality have been negative. And that for us, even people without disabilities, and growing up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or whenever, that the messages that you receive, it affects your ability to talk about sexuality. And so if you think that sexuality is something that is dirty or maybe that it's very private and not to be discussed, these old messages can kind of get in the way when we're trying to talk with our children about this topic. So it's very important. One tip we're going to give you right now is that it's very important to try to replace these negative messages with positive messages about sexuality. And giving you the message, the fact that you all have joined us here today live, or people that are reviewing this webinar on sometime in the future on YouTube, I want to just say congratulations to you that you are really giving yourself permission. You are telling yourself it's okay to talk about sexuality, and that really people with disabilities, your children with disabilities, need information about sexuality, and they need it to be able to have a safe and happy life. So Max, I have a question for you. Why do you think it is important to talk about sexuality education? Why do you think people with disabilities need sexuality education?
Well, because I think that it definitely breaks. It's good because I think they deserve people with disabilities deserve the same good information as everybody else. We talked about myths, we talked about messages and the negative messages that can come with talking about the topic and how to replace them with positive messages. It's a very sensitive topic in our culture. A lot of messages, a lot of opinions out there about the topic. And there's a lot of myths about people with disabilities when it comes to sexuality as well. And I think that people with disabilities deserve good information to make healthy decisions in their lives when they want to have a relationship, and also to protect themselves too, because they can be vulnerable to things that could happen to them that could not be good. It also sets a pattern of communication. Ignoring it can lead to negative thoughts about sexuality. It increases our self-esteem when we understand and know our bodies, about our bodies. And it increases trust between a child and a parent when they know they can ask questions and get accurate information at home. Other additional reasons why it's important to talk about sexuality is that it combats all the inaccurate and unrealistic messages our media sends young people. Our parents can express their values, which is a starting place for us when we form our own beliefs, and staff should not do this. People are more likely to wait to have sex, and if they choose to have sex, use protection if their parents discussed sexuality with them while they were growing up. It increases the possibility that the child will have needed skills to be in a relationship. Children who have been abused may heal better and view their sexuality as a positive thing versus a painful experience. Accurate information can decrease your child's vulnerability of being abused. It's important to educate children with the right information about sexuality, and begin to educate your children about STIs, sexually transmitted infections.
So there's all kinds of myths out there about people with disabilities and just in general about sexuality education. One of them that I heard frequently was that if we talk about sexuality, somehow that's going to be encouraging people to try out undesirable or inappropriate sexual acts. And actually, all the research is actually says the opposite. Research that's been done on people who have been talked to about with their parents about sexuality and who have received sexuality education, as Max already said, really make better decisions when it comes to expressing their sexuality, and actually typically delay expressing their sexuality, and are also more responsible. And also, I think it is very important because people with disabilities may not be able to kind of pick up the kind of information just on the internet or just casually. So it's really important for us to be able to take the time and make sure that the information that's provided to people that is accessible, and so people aren't confused. And one thing I really want to point out is that because, and I know this is a sensitive topic, but because the abuse rate for people with developmental disabilities is so high, sometimes it could be 4 or 5 times higher, or even higher than that, than people without disabilities. It is so important for us to be able to provide education to people. There are studies that are out there that have talked about how if people use the correct terminology when they're referring to the sexual parts of their body, that it's a message to predators that this person is having, conversations or has people in their life that they talk to about sexuality. And it's been reported that predators will kind of stay away from someone who is using the right terminology or seems to be able to have more education about, just simple things like, a man or a young man referring to his penis as a penis and not a wee-wee or something like that. You really want to, I know it sounds kind of maybe a simple thing, but people that come across as educated and informed, it gives a strong signal to predators that, wait a minute, somebody's talking to this person about sexuality. They feel comfortable talking about sexuality, and so they're in regular conversation, and it's a good people have found that it's a good way to kind of deter people. I'm not saying that that's foolproof in any way, but it is something that's helpful. Sometimes people also say that there's a myth out there that, maybe my son or daughter may never really be getting married, or, so why would I even talk to them about having children or having sexual relationships? And it's just that sexuality is so pervasive in our culture, and people are just, seeing things, on television, jokes, in movies, in advertising, just in ordinary conversation. Since it's such a prominent feature in our culture, it's really important to make sure that people get the information and are just kind of not left out of conversations. So, and actually, so they're not confused when they hear things referred to. So Max, I'm wondering if you could, I'll turn it back over to you here since I seem to be going on and on a little bit here. I want to ask you, what are some of the reasons why it can be difficult to talk about sexuality with your son or daughter?
That's a really good question, and it's an excellent question because from what we have discovered, it can be difficult because people like you can feel embarrassed. You don't know how to talk about the topic. You may be stuck with wondering what too much or too little is. You may be wondering like what age-appropriate information. You may be curious about what is age-appropriate information. No one talked with us. You may not know, the answers, or you may, you don't know the answers, or you don't know where to start. Some people have, trouble of where to start. People may be struggling with how much information to give at a time. How to present the information can be difficult. And when it comes to conversation, who talks to whom? Like daughter to son, or mother to father, or also what we see here is that it's difficult for all of us, myself included.
We are not going to get into a long list. We're not going to review it with all of you, but at the very end of the PowerPoint, you'll see we've provided you with a list of discussion topics that are kind of laid out developmentally that are just, a good place for people to start in terms of things to cover with their son or daughter, and we'll show you at the very end there. But Max, I'm wondering if right now if we can kind of talk about what is the role of the parent?
Yes, I can. So the role of a parent for you is to provide information, to communicate values, and what I mean by that is it's really your role to kind of communicate your values, not the person who's a staff member. It's your values that count, not someone who may be supporting a person with a disability as a staff member. Your role is to listen. Your role also is to demonstrate or show. Your role is to give support. Your role is to answer questions honestly. And also respond in a positive way about sexuality.
A big role also is to combat these negative messages that people are getting. So combating that message that people with disabilities are either asexual or they're oversexed. And just, you know, getting the message across to people that you feel like they have the right to express their sexuality just as like someone, just the same as someone else that doesn't have a disability. You want to combat that message that one thing that's really common within our members of Green Mountain Self-Advocates is people always are complaining that people are always treating them like a child. And so it's really important for people's parents, and we know that you already do this, and we love it that our families are right out there and trying to communicate to the world and also to us that, you know, you see us as adults, or you see people as adults, and that they are going to be jobs and living in the world and taking on responsibilities as everyone else. The other message about people not deserving privacy and that, you know, you don't really need to have social opportunities. One thing that I think we've done really a great job here in Vermont is embracing inclusion and making sure that people are included in typical classrooms, and that people have jobs, and that people go to church, and they are, you know, on recreation. You know, they go to the local fitness outlets and fitness clubs, and people are, we really push to say that people are included in so many ways. But one message that I want to kind of, one question I have is for all of us to think about is that that all of these active social activities, having jobs, all these other ways of being independent, they really are not a substitute for intimacy. If we all think of people without disabilities, if we think about the role that intimacy plays in our lives, and just think about how we really, if we really are pushing for full inclusion of people with disabilities, we want to also kind of break through this final barrier and looking at making sure that people have opportunities to have intimacy in their life. Okay, we have a question here about, can you explain, demonstrate, or show? And you want to do that, Max? Go for it.
Well, I have an example to answer this question. What I would give you for that answer for demonstrate or show is maybe if somebody were to ask you, or your son or daughter were to ask you how to put a condom on. I know that that I think one way to do that is, you know, kind of show them maybe by using like a real condom and maybe like a piece of fruit or something like a banana to kind of demonstrate how to put a condom on accurately. And I know that that was demonstrated to me when I was younger through sexual education when I was a teenager. And also I practiced it myself on a piece of fruit myself at home so I can get familiarized with that. So thank you very much for asking that question, and that's an example of demonstrating or showing.
There's also, we did not provide this resource, but we'll be glad to talk to Katie and other folks here at the Vermont Family Network. There's all kinds of dolls that you can buy that are, and I'm not talking about like a typical doll, but they're dolls that are anatomically correct and are used for sexuality education for people with developmental disabilities that are wonderful. So we're going to, we have one more question here, but before we get into it, I think we are going to go to our general tips that we'd like to offer about providing sexuality education. So you know what, Max, I'm gonna just have you present all of these because it'll be awkward going back and forth with the microphone. So here we go.
So the general tips is you may have to initiate the conversation. It is okay to feel embarrassed if you don't know the answer and answer the question later. Use a private tone in a private place. Give age-appropriate information. Use models, visuals, TV, soap operas, role plays, and scenarios. And try to give a consistent message. Try not to react such that you alarm the person. And practice.
Thank you, Max.
You're welcome.
I'm going to hand the microphone over to Katie from Vermont Family Network. She wanted to share about some resources that Vermont Family Network has.
I just wanted to know, in terms of the demonstrator show as well as the general tips, that VFN has a lending library and that we recently got a grant and a whole lot of resources on sexuality and disability, including some videos and books that can help parents navigate this topic, as well as resources specifically for the individual with a disability. So I'll hand you back to Karen now.
We got a question that says, are topics of sexuality discussed in Green Mountain self-advocacy support groups? Where are support groups held in Vermont? And are they for teenagers too? We would like to say that we have a website that is gmsavt.org. On our website, we have a list of the 21 or so self-advocacy groups that are located all over the state. If you look at our calendar, it gives a list of the times that those and locations of those meetings. In terms of discussing sexuality, I will turn it over to Max. Can you comment, Max, on whether or not the topics of sexuality, the relationships comes up in self-advocacy meetings?
They can. They can. It depends on where people are going with the conversation, but I think they do. I think that relationships do and sexuality does come up at meetings. There are people with disabilities that are married and in relationships, and sometimes they talk about the good times and the hard times with that. And sometimes, depending on the direction that the conversation goes, yes, I think sexuality is, a topic that people do discuss.
At different parts of the state, also some of the local self-advocacy groups, in conjunction sometimes with the local developmental service agencies, they run men's groups and women's groups. And if you got in touch with either Max, email Max at gmsavt.org or Topper, Topper at gmsavt.org. We can let you know where in the state that there are some active men's groups and women's groups happening. There also have been some co-ed support groups that are specifically focused on issues of relationships. Although what we found is that a lot of times people like to have a men's group or a women's group. In terms of teenagers too, I guess it depends on what you mean by teenagers. There are lots of high school students that participate in local self-advocacy groups. There are even some high schools that have their own self-advocacy groups, a few that are supported by Green Mountain Self-Advocates. We also be willing to work with high schools to develop a local self-advocacy group. But I think one thing we want to be clear is that the conversations that people have are for adults, and so most of the people that are teenagers are really 16 or over. They really are, age of consent in participating in the conversations. We have not facilitated any groups where teenagers were under the age of 16. Not that we wouldn't, but we just have never been approached to do that. But I do feel like there would have to be a different flavor for that. I think the same information needs to be shared, but obviously having adults with 14-year-olds, I have to think about this, but just being asked this question, I would say that pretty much we would want to keep it an adult group. And it also says when you say age-appropriate information, do you mean a person's chronological age or their maturity age? And I would like to say that we're definitely talking about a person's their age, how old they are, their chronological age, because we really haven't gone with the whole notion of that idea that boy, it's slipping my mind right now, but we really feel like just because a person is 25 years old and they may do math like someone that is 7 or 8 years old, they actually are 25 years old. They have a body of somebody that's 25 years old. They have the desires of someone that's 25 years old. They hang out with people a lot of times that are their same age group. So we really treat adults like adults and find that is the best way to go. If somebody needs to have information in a more straightforward way or in a more concrete way, then we see that as an accommodation, and so we would look at how we are presenting information and making sure that the person understands. But we really kind of treat adults like adults. So, Max, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Yeah. Tips.
So the purpose of this activity is to say the words and just try to answer the question. You don't have to do it perfectly. This idea is to become more comfortable saying the words. While in this process, here are some suggestions on how to go about answering questions for your child. Reassure the child that it is good to ask questions. Find out what the child thinks or is really asking. Decide what, quote-unquote, messages you want to give. Answer simply using correct vocabulary. Encourage the child to give you feedback.
So Max and I are going to do a role play, and it's going to be a little bit of a delay between our responses. It's going to, because we're passing back and forth a microphone here, but we are going to try to demonstrate the steps that we talked about. Is there anyone who can go back? So the very first step being reassuring someone that it's okay to ask a question. And then the next step where we talk about kind of finding out what the person really thinks or really is interested in, deciding what kind of message to give, and then thinking about how to encourage the person to give some feedback. So Max, we're going to give this a try.
All right. Hey, how's it going, Topper?
It's going well. How you doing there, Max?
I'm doing excellent, but there, I have something on my mind that I wanted to ask you. What do you think I should, have, do you think I should wait until I'm married to have sex?
Wow, Max, I'm really glad that you came to me and asked me that question. I'm your godmother after all, and I'm a good person to talk to about this, and certainly know how your mom and dad feel about all of this. So, before I kind of dive into kind of things that our family has said, I'm curious, like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? What are your thoughts about whether or not you should have sex before you get married?
I don't know. I just, my cousin Pete is in like this really kind of strict. He goes to like church, and he's like, he grew up, he grew up like, kind of believing that, it's probably a good idea to wait until you're married, but to have sex. But I just don't know how to respond to that. I just want to see like what you think, because it's just it's my cousin here, but I don't know, should I like agree with them or not?
Mm-hmm. Wow, it's pretty. Obviously you've been hanging out with Pete. We've been those family reunions, kind of catching up with him, finding out what's going on. But we had all kinds of people in our family. I'm wondering, what about some of your other cousins? Do you think that your other cousins share that belief that like you think everybody in our family kind of agrees with what Pete has to say?
I don't think they do. I haven't brought this up with my other cousins. I think that they probably may have found some things out themselves. I haven't asked them, so I'm just trying to look for some information. I just don't know what side to take. So,
well, Max, our cousins from down in Florida, they have. I don't think that any of our cousins down there are actually married. The ones that are your age, and yet I do know that they live with some of their partners. I think you've met Joey's girlfriend, Tamara, right? So I guess that they definitely are having a sexual relationship with each other. And so I think it's kind of like some people decide that they do want to wait until they get married, and some people have said that that it's okay for people to have it that are in a committed relationship, that it's okay for them to have sex before that. I'm wondering, Max, what do you think that you need to know? What are things that you need to, what kind of information or what kind of things do you need to know before you would make that decision?
That's a really hard question, because I'm stuck here between two sides, and I just I can't seem to figure that out. I just want to see like what you have for me. I mean, in terms of information here.
Well, I would be glad to give you some information. I got to be honest with you. I am your godmother, but I don't feel comfortable making the decision for you. So I really think that you are a smart young guy, and given the right information, I think that you definitely can make your own decision about this. It would be important for me that you knew about how to have be safe when you're having sexual relations. So has anyone ever talked to you about using a condom? Have you been able to learn about sexually transmitted diseases, or learning about what happens if what you need to do to protect yourself protect your partner from getting pregnant?
Yeah, from you. That's why I would like more information from you.
Well, I'll tell you what. I don't have my book with me, and I also want to say that, Max, I just know that you've had girlfriends before when you were in high school, so I kind of assumed that you're interested in dating women, but it's perfectly fine if you decided that you wanted to date men, because you know that Lisa and our Aunt Lisa, she has a partner, but her partner is a woman, so totally let you know that that's okay too. But I'd be glad to get you some more information about sexuality, and I also encourage you to talk to your parents about this, because I know that they have a very definite opinion. Do you know what your parents' opinion is about this?
I don't, and I'm a little scared to ask them.
Oh, okay. Well, how about would you feel comfortable if maybe you and your mom and I sat down and talked about sexuality sometime?
I mean, we could give it a try, but I'm a little bit on the nervous side of that.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll certainly let you think about it and make sure that you can pick the time and place, but I really think that we should sit down and talk to your folks too if you feel comfortable about that, because I know your mom and she's wondering about the same kind of thing. She's wondering if you're getting the right information. So I think she's just as nervous as you are to have the conversation. But you guys have talked about so many other things that I think it would be great. So Max, save me, end this role play right now. Can we end the role play?
Okay, fine. I'll take your advice.
Okay.
We'll see how it goes.
All right, thank you. That was not a perfect role play, but thank you for listening to that. I want to let you know that we have provided you with some actual suggestions of things that you can say. So when it comes to people asking you questions about sexuality, we can share with you lots of other answers if you like, but the ones that we've chosen today are, so sometimes people will ask you informational questions, so they kind of want to know, like, what is a boner might be something that someone might ask you, and so might use slang words or things like that. So what we've provided for you is some things that you can actually say. Another informational question that might come up is, how are babies made? And so so what we've done is just provided you with some very straightforward facts that you could say to someone. Of course, if this is all a whole lot of information, you might need to break it down or talk about one thing at a time or use the anatomical correct dolls that we suggested. Other kinds of questions that people ask you will be kind of how do you kind of questions. So, so how do people have sex? What is sex? People might ask you. Again, you'll be able to have access to this PowerPoint later. People might say, how do I know if I'm in love with somebody? Really, we're focusing today about sexuality because that's what people asked us to focus on, but to be honest with you, probably 85% of the questions that we get are really more focused on relationships. Okay. And then we'll get into the kind of question that Max asked me about what do I think about whether or not he should have sex before he gets married. And those are what do you think questions. And although we really feel like it's very important and it's the role of parents to share values and share beliefs, obviously with their sons and daughters. I want to emphasize what Max said earlier. We do not feel that that's the role of support staff or teachers in school. They really need to be providing more value-neutral information to your sons and daughters. The values have to come, I feel, should come from families. But we also feel that it's very helpful to kind of support your loved one to make their own decision. I could have ended the conversation very quickly for Max and said, Max, I think I know you, and you should really wait until you get married to have sex. And I think it could have given him the answer maybe he was looking for, but I was really trying to push him to kind of making his own decision. So asking questions like, what do you think? What have you heard? What's important to you? And then we kind of did this whole dance where some people say, so the one cousin said this, another cousin said that. So presenting different points of view, different options, and then trying to support Max to kind of tease out what are the things that are best for him. So we were going to take some time to practice, and I think it may be rather difficult, but what I wanted to suggest for you all is that we did come up with some scenarios for you to think about, and so what I'm going to do is pass the microphone back to Max. And Max, did you want to comment on any of these scenarios?
Yeah, I could do that, actually. We were going to give you scenarios, and what I was going to do is read each scenario and give an opportunity for someone to respond before I go on to the next one. But I think that's going to be a little difficult. Right. So I may read one at a time.
So why don't we read number 5?
All right. Your daughter likes a boy in the neighborhood and acts overly affectionate toward him. How do you respond?
So Max, do you have any ideas? You may have seen that sometimes in your self-advocacy group where someone has really got a crush on somebody and they're sitting next to the person really close and they're touching them a lot. What are some things that maybe you have done as kind of a peer leader to kind of help the person in that situation?
Well, I've seen this I've seen this happen a couple times. Sort of like my way of saying it is sort of touchy-feely. I don't want to get into too much detail, but I could probably just say that I think I just told the person like in like a a nice, respectful way that it's understandable that you have you may have feelings toward this person, but you just want to be aware of like their space, just their space, and just just to be aware of like their of course just not not overdoing something or doing something that can make them feel uncomfortable or uneasy. But I don't think that I've ever been mean to this person because I don't want to make them uncomfortable or frightened.
And I think sometimes what we've found, Max, is that people just don't know other ways to kind of, flirt with someone or express the fact that they like someone, and I know one of the more popular workshops that we've done at Green Mountain Self-Advocates is flirty dancing, where we literally teach people how to flirt, and people just, sometimes if you do it as a group, people have an opportunity to kind of check those things out. So just seeing all of these as learning opportunities and thinking about what is it that you'd rather have the person do, and, what's the more appropriate way for someone to react, and just how do we teach someone about that. We're down towards the end here, and we've got a few questions, and I want to, Max and I have an opportunity to answer those. I also wanted to kind of point out that there are two more slides. One is there's a slide about suggestions about what to do if you kind of actually come across someone who is, how do you respond to acts or comments from your son or daughter about sexuality? And also, as we also said that we were going to present, we have a list of topics that you can cover. So all of this will be available to you after the webinar is posted. We have a question here that said, school professionals are interested in learning more about this topic. Do you have any resources available for them, and do you have any suggestions? Well, we have lots of resources available to them. Actually, Green Mountain Self-Advocates worked with Catherine McLaughlin. Her website has been posted on the bottom of most of the slides that we have up here at disabilityworkshops.com. I would strongly suggest that people could get in touch with either Catherine McLaughlin or get in touch with Green Mountain Self-Advocates. We teach lots of sexuality workshops. We have lots of materials. We have a curriculum that is for people with developmental disabilities that has over 20 lessons in it about sexuality that was written by Catherine but co-authored by some people at Green Mountain Self-Advocates. So we very much would encourage that. The one advantage in getting in touch with Green Mountain Self-Advocates is that you can have peer leaders to be able to come and talk to the students, which people have found really helpful. So if I'm 58, if I come in and I can work on teaching a workshop, but I'd much rather have Max, who's this great young peer leader in the self-advocacy movement, and having him come in and teach a workshop with with high school students. Certainly, it goes over a lot better than having me come in and teach it. So although we have information for professionals, we also really would push the idea that peers would be involved. Let's see if there is, I don't think that there's any other questions right here. I think we're okay. So Max, I'm going to turn the microphone back over to you, and there is a comment that you're being asked to read about the webinar.
Thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. This webinar will be archived on Vermont Family Network's website along with many other previously recorded webinars. Be sure to visit VFN's website at www.vermontfamilynetwork.org for a complete list of upcoming webinars, workshops, and support groups. Have a great day.